A billionaire came home earlier than usual and found the nanny softly humming a lullaby to calm his restless twins. He stopped at the doorway, struck by the unfamiliar warmth in the room. This wasn't just a story about wealth and status, it was about love breaking through walls, second chances, and the courage to open a guarded heart. Before we begin, comment below and tell us where you're watching from, because this is one love story you'll never forget. Alexander Steele was the kind of man who moved through Manhattan like he owned every inch of it. At 30, practically his name was on skyscrapers, in glossy magazines, whispered in boardrooms. The city obeyed his ambition. His schedule was a masterpiece of precision workouts at 5, meetings stacked until 8, dinners with investors, charity, galas all planned to the minute. There was no room for chaos, no space for softness. But tonight, the twins had refused to sleep. They were only 3 years old. Emma and Ethan, both with golden curls and stubborn streaks inherited from their late mother. Alexander had been raising them with the help of a string of nannies, none lasting longer than a few months. He wasn't cruel, but his standards were impossible. He demanded perfection the way he demanded profits, without compromise. Until her daughter Isabella Hartley was not the nanny he expected. She was 26, with warm brown eyes and a smile that seemed to wrap around the twins like a blanket. She wasn't intimidated by his wealth, nor impressed by it. The first time they met, she had looked him square in the eye while he laid out his rules, sharp, cold, unbending, and simply said, "Children need love, Mr. Steele, not a schedule." He had almost fired her on the spot, but the twins adored her. And now, standing unseen at the door of the nursery, Alexander understood why. Isabella sat in the rocking chair, one twin in each arm, singing softly. Her hair tumbled over her shoulder, in loose waves, catching the faint light of the lamp. She looked tired but peaceful, her voice threading through the air like warmth on a winter night. Something in Alexander shifted. He had spent years burying himself in work after his wife's death, building walls so high even his children only knew glimpses of him between conference calls. Yet here was this woman, melting the tension from his home with nothing but a lullaby and a steady heartbeat. Isabella glanced up and saw him. "Mr. Steele," she whispered, careful not to wake the twins. "You're home early." Her voice was soft but steady, no fluster, no nervous smile, just calm acknowledgement, like she belonged here. He stepped inside, his shoes silent on the plush carpet. "They wouldn't sleep. They had a rough evening," she murmured. "Nightmares. Siblings feel each other's fear, it spreads. I told them they were safe." Safe? When was the last time his home had felt that way? Alexander watched as she laid the children down, pulling the blankets to their chins with infinite care. Something tightened in his chest at the sight. He had hired Isabella because her references were impeccable. He was beginning to realize her heart was too. When they left the nursery, closing the door softly behind them, Alexander found himself at a loss for words. He was a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. Yet now, facing this woman in her simple sweater and jeans, he could only say, "Thank you." Isabella tilted her head. "For what?" "For whatever that was in there." He gestured vaguely toward the nursery. "They look at you like you hang the moon." She smiled faintly. "They just need someone to show up for them." The words landed heavier than she knew for the first time in years. Alexander wondered if he'd been showing up for anyone at all, and as Isabella turned to gather the twins' toys from the floor, he realized something else. His perfectly ordered life had just been interrupted by a woman who didn't care about his money, who challenged him without fear, and whose warmth was beginning to thaw the coldest parts of him. He should have walked away. Instead, he found himself asking, "Do you always sing to them?" "Only when they're scared," she said softly, not looking at him. "Music tells children what words can't, that they're not alone." Alexander thought about that long after she left the room. Something told him he wasn't done hearing her sing. Alexander hadn't meant to linger in the hallway that night, but something about Isabella's words kept echoing in his head. They just need someone to show up for them. He had always believed his job was to provide money, security, the best schools, the safest home. Yet when he lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling while the city lights spilled across the room, he wondered if he had been giving his children everything except himself. The next morning, his routine faltered for the first time in years. Instead of leaving before the twins woke, Alexander found himself at the breakfast table watching Isabella braid Emma's hair while Ethan pushed blueberries across his plate. Isabella moved around the kitchen with an ease that contrasted sharply with the steel and glass coldness of his penthouse. She hummed under her breath again, the same soft tune from last night. The twins giggled when she kissed the tops of their heads before serving their breakfast. Alexander had no idea the last time anyone had laughed in this apartment before she arrived. "Do you always make pancakes?" he asked suddenly. Isabella glanced over her shoulder, surprised he was still here. "They like them and they're easy, seems domestic." She arched a brow. "Is that a complaint?" He almost smiled. "Almost no, just unusual." Isabella shrugged. "Children need rituals. Rituals feel like love." He didn't reply. He didn't know how. That evening, Alexander canceled a dinner meeting for the first time in 5 years. He told himself it was because he needed rest. But when he came home early again and heard Isabella's laughter drifting down the hallway, Something inside him unknotted. She was in the living room, the twins dancing in pajamas while she clapped along, hair falling into her face. The sight hit him like a memory. He didn't know he'd lost a family, or something that felt dangerously close to one. When she finally noticed him, Isabella flushed, tucking hair behind her ear. Sorry, we were just burning off energy before bed. He leaned against the doorway, loosening his tie. I didn't say stop. The twins ran to him, then Naima, tugging at his sleeve, Ethan holding up a crayon drawing with both hands. You're home, Emma squealed. Look what we made, Ethan added proudly. Alexander took the paper. It was messy and colorful. A house with stick figure people standing outside, one tall figure, one with long hair, two small ones holding hands. It wasn't lost on him who they were meant to be. Isabella busied herself gathering toys, but he noticed the faint blush on her cheeks. She had no idea how much this drawing would stay with him long after they went to bed. Days turned into weeks. Alexander started coming home earlier. Sometimes he told himself it was to spend time with the twins. Other times he admitted silently it was because of her. He found himself watching Isabella read bedtime stories. The twins curled against her, her voice weaving magic into the words. He found himself listening for her humming in the kitchen. He found himself noticing things he shouldn't, like the way her eyes softened when she laughed, or the small crease between her brows when she concentrated. He wasn't supposed to notice. She was the nanny. He was their father. This was a line he couldn't cross, and yet one Friday night he walked in to find Isabella asleep on the couch, a children's book still open in her hand. The twins were asleep too, bundled under blankets beside her. She looked exhausted but peaceful, a lock of hair falling across her face. Alexander stood there longer than he should have, staring. Something about the sight made his chest ache. He had the sudden, reckless urge to brush the hair from her cheek, but he didn't. Instead, he quietly carried the twins to their beds, one by one, before returning for her. When he said her name softly, Isabella startled awake. Oh, Mr. Steele, I didn't mean to. Alexander, he said before he could stop himself. Call me Alexander. She blinked at him, surprised. Then she nodded slowly, and for reasons he couldn't name, it felt like the beginning of something he wasn't ready to admit. The first time Isabella called him Alexander, it felt strange. She said it the next morning, her voice steady as she handed him a cup of coffee before leaving for the park with the twins. Thank you, Alexander. It was ordinary, casual, yet it settled in his chest with the weight of something dangerous over the next week. He noticed more things about her, things he had no business noticing. The way she knelt on the floor to color with the twins, completely unsaid. The way she laughed with her whole face, not just her mouth. The way she always smelled faintly of vanilla and soap. Even after a long day, she was changing the rhythm of his home, and he didn't know how to stop it. One evening a storm rolled over Manhattan, rain streaking the floor-to-ceiling windows as thunder rumbled in the distance. Alexander came home to find Isabella curled on the couch with the twins, reading aloud by the glow of a lamp. The children clung to her when lightning flashed outside. See, she soothed softly, the storm can't come in here, we're safe. The word hit him again. Safe. His life had been built on power, money, control, but safety. That was something he couldn't buy. Something he wasn't sure he had ever truly given his children. Isabella looked up as he entered. You're home early again, she said with a faint smile. Seems I've been making a habit of it, he admitted, loosening his tie. The twins leapt from the couch to greet him, tiny arms wrapping around his legs. For the first time, Alexander realized that they didn't hesitate anymore. They came to him willingly now, not cautiously as before. Was that because of Isabella? Probably. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Alexander found Isabella cleaning up crayons and books in the living room. You don't have to do that, he said. She shrugged. I like things tidy. He almost laughed. So do I, he wanted to say, but with her tidiness wasn't about control. It was about comfort, about making spaces feel lived in instead of staged. Do you always stay this late? He asked instead. If the twins need me, yes, she replied simply. They've had a lot of change in their lives. Consistency helps. She didn't say like losing their mother. She didn't have to. Something in him softened further that the night when she left her umbrella behind. It was pouring when Isabella finally stepped outside. Alexander was on the balcony above, watching as she struggled with her coat in the rain, clearly debating whether to make a run for it. Without thinking, he grabbed his own umbrella and followed her. You'll be drenched before you get to the subway, he said, holding it out. She looked startled. I can manage. You don't have to, he said simply. She hesitated before stepping beneath it. The air between them felt charged as they walked to the corner, the rain pounding the pavement around them. When they reached the station, Isabella turned to him. Thank you, Alexander. There it was again, his name, and for reasons he didn't want to examine too closely. He wished she wouldn't stop saying it. That night, alone in his penthouse, Alexander couldn't shake the image of her walking away in the rain, her hair damp, her shoulders straight, her smile small but real. He was in trouble. Big trouble. The next weekend brought the charity gala. It was the kind of event Alexander Steele had mastered: champagne towers, glittering chandeliers, the city's elite murmuring in tuxedos and evening gowns. Normally, he navigated these nights with ease, shaking hands, signing checks, smiling for cameras. But tonight felt different, because tonight, as he prepared in his penthouse, he found himself wondering if Isabella would be watching the twins, and wondering why he cared. When he left for the gala, the twins were already in pajamas, coloring on the living room floor. Isabella sat cross-legged beside them, her hair in a loose braid, wearing the same soft sweater she always did. "Behave for Isabella," Alexander told the children, and then hesitated. "If you need me." Isabella looked up surprised. "We'll be fine. Go enjoy your evening." He nodded, but as he rode down the elevator, he realized he didn't want to enjoy it. Not without something, though he couldn't name it yet. The gala was endless speeches and crystal glasses clinking under chandeliers. But halfway through the evening, as music swelled and the city glittered below the rooftop terrace, Alexander caught himself checking his phone. Nothing from home. No calls, no texts. She was handling everything, of course she was. And yet, as he stared down at Manhattan's lights, all he could picture was Isabella back in his apartment, reading bedtime stories in that soft voice, her braid falling over one shoulder. As the twins leaned against her, he left early. When Alexander returned home, the apartment was quiet. The twins were asleep. Isabella was curled on the couch reading a book. She looked up as he entered. "How was the gala?" "Loud," he said, honestly, loosening his tie. "Too many people?" She smiled faintly. "You left early." He hesitated. Yes, he didn't say it was because of her. Over the next few days, the rhythm of their lives shifted again. The twins grew more attached to Isabella, which made sense. But Alexander realized he was too. It was in the way he found excuses to linger when she read to them. The way he started eating dinner at home instead of at restaurants. The way he asked about her day, her life. Things beyond the walls of this penthouse. She always answered simply, rarely giving much away, until one night, when the twins were asleep and she lingered in the kitchen rinsing dishes. "Why did you become a nanny?" Alexander asked. She dried her hands on a towel, eyes thoughtful. "Because children don't care how much money you make. They care if you show up, and I like being someone they can count on." There it was again. That word, show up. It cracked something in him every time she said it. That evening ended with them standing at the window, looking out at the rain-slicked city. Neither spoke for a long time. It wasn't silence exactly, more like the beginning of something unspoken. Something Alexander wasn't sure he was ready for. But as Isabella turned to leave, her reflection in the glass caught his, and for one brief, reckless moment, he thought about what it would be like to kiss her. The following week changed everything. It started with a phone call, urgent, panicked, from the twins' preschool. Emma had fallen and hit her head. During recess, Alexander was in the middle of a board meeting when the call came. His assistant barely finished speaking before he was already out the door, his car racing through Manhattan traffic like his life depended on it. When he arrived at the school, Isabella was already there. Emma sat in her lap, tear-streaked but safe, a tiny ice pack pressed to her forehead. Isabella held her close, murmuring softly, her arms a fortress against the world. The moment Alexander saw them, something in him broke, not because of the injury, it was minor. The doctor assured him, but because Isabella had been there before he was. Because his daughter had clung to her first. Because he realized, with startling clarity, that Isabella had become the heartbeat of his children's lives, and maybe his, too. On the drive home, the twins dozed in the back seat while rain missed the windows. Isabella sat beside them, quiet, her hand resting protectively on Emma's knee. "Thank you," Alexander said finally, his voice low. She looked at him. "You don't have to thank me for being there. That's my job." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You were there because you care." "Not everyone would." Isabella didn't answer right away. "Children know when someone truly shows up for them," she said softly. "It matters." There it was again. That phrase, that it felt like a knife and a gift all at once. That night, after the twins were asleep, Alexander found himself in the kitchen where Isabella was washing bottles at the sink. "You handled everything today," he said. She shrugged, not looking at him. "Kids get hurt, they bounce back." He moved closer. "You were calm, I wasn't." Finally she turned, drying her hands on a towel. "Because you're their father. It's different for you." Their eyes met, and something shifted in the space between them, something fragile but undeniable. The next evening, Alexander canceled yet another dinner meeting. He came home early and found Isabella in the living room with the twins, building a blanket fort. Fairy lights twinkled inside, tiny stars strung across pillows and blankets like a secret world. "Come in, Daddy." Emma, Squealed. Ethan held up a sign made of construction paper. "No grown-ups unless invited." Isabella laughed, as Alexander ducked inside the fort, his suit wrinkling against the carpet. It was ridiculous. It was perfect. For the first time in years. Alexander laughed until his stomach hurt. After the twins fell asleep in their fort, Alexander and Isabella lingered in the soft glow of the fairy lights. You're good with them, she said quietly. They're my kids, he replied. That doesn't always mean anything, she said before she could stop herself. He looked at her sharply, and she flushed. I just mean, being present is different from providing. Most people don't get both. He didn't answer right away, because he knew she was right. When she finally stood to leave, Alexander walked her to the door. The air between them felt charged again, like that night in the rain. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled in his chest. Instead, he just said, "Good night, Isabella." And for the first time, she smiled at him in a way that made him wonder if, maybe, just maybe, she felt it too. The next week felt different. Alexander noticed it in the way Isabella moved through the apartment, still warm, still kind, but with something quieter beneath the surface. He wasn't imagining it. It started after the night of the blanket fort, after the moment at the door when he almost said more than he should have. Now, she avoided his gaze just a little longer than before. It smiled, but too quickly. It left him unsettled in a way business losses never could. One evening, after the twins were asleep, he found her folding laundry in the living room. You've been quiet lately, he said, leaning against the doorway. She didn't look up. I've just been busy. He stepped closer. Did I do something? Finally, she met his eyes. This isn't my world, Alexander. Your dinners, your cars, your penthouse with its windows overlooking the city. It's not mine. I'm just here for the children. Just here for the children. The words landed like a slap, though her tone was gentle. That night, he sat alone in his office, staring at the skyline. He had spent years building walls so high no one could reach him. Now someone had climbed inside, and she was reminding him she didn't belong. For the first time in years, Alexander felt the sharp edge of something dangerously close to regret. The next day, Isabella took the twins to the park. When Alexander left work early to join them, a decision that shocked even his driver. He'd found Isabella pushing Emma on the swings while Ethan ran through the grass. The children squealed when they saw him. You came, Emma cried, her hair flying as she leapt from the swing into his arms. He laughed, spinning her around before setting her down. But when he glanced at Isabella, she only smiled politely, like he was any other parent. Like nothing had changed between them at all. It shouldn't have bothered him as much as it did that evening. Over dinner with the twins, Isabella told him she was considering taking a weekend job offer, something temporary. Just a few hours at a children's bookstore. Far, he said carefully. Just uptown, she corrected. They need help for story hour on Saturdays. I love reading to kids. He had no right to object. She was free to do whatever she wanted. But the thought of her spending Saturday mornings somewhere else, laughing and reading to children who weren't his, made him unreasonably tense. Sounds nice, he said stiffly. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Alexander stood by the window, the city glittering below. For years, work had been his refuge. Now his refuge was in the next room, reading bedtime stories to his children, singing lullabies softly enough to make even his restless mind go still. And for the first time in his life, Alexander Steele wondered if the thing he wanted most wasn't something he could buy. It was someone he wasn't sure he was allowed to want. It was Saturday morning when everything changed. The twins were at their art class, and Alexander returned home earlier than usual. He expected to find the apartment empty, but Isabella was in the kitchen, hair tied up, making pancakes. Like it was the most natural thing in the world. He watched her for a moment, leaning silently against the doorway. Why aren't you at the bookstore? He asked finally. She turned, startled, spatula in hand. It didn't work out why. Her shrug was casual, but there was something in her eyes he couldn't read. They needed someone permanent. My work here isn't. The words landed like a weight in his chest. Later that day, a storm rolled in over Manhattan. Heavy rain streaking the windows as the wind howled through the city. The twins huddled on the couch with Isabella watching a movie. Alexander joined them. The four of them tangled under blankets as thunder rumbled overhead. It was domestic. It was warm. It was everything he hadn't known he wanted until now. When the children finally fell asleep, Alexander and Isabella stayed in the living room, the storm outside wrapping the world in darkness. You're quiet tonight, she said softly. He hesitated. I keep wondering what this place would feel like if you weren't here. She froze, eyes on her hands. I told you this isn't my world. Maybe it should be, he said before he could stop himself. Her head snapped up. Alexander, I mean it, he said, voice low. You've given my children more than I have in years. And me too, if I'm honest. She shook her head. Standing, this isn't fair. You're their father. You're not just anything. His voice was sharper than he intended. You matter here. To them, to me. The words hung between them like lightning. She turned toward the window, arms wrapped around herself. I can't be part of your life the way you think, she whispered. People like you, and people like me, we don't fit. Why not? Because men like you marry women from galas and boardrooms, not nannies with student loans and second-hand cars. He crossed the room slowly, stopping just behind her. Maybe men like me have been getting it wrong, he said softly. Isabella didn't move. The storm raged outside, but the real storm was in the inches of space between them, in the way her breath caught when he reached for her hand. In the way neither of them pulled away, the twins stood upstairs. Then, a small cry breaking the moment. Isabella pulled back instantly, stepping toward the hallway. "I should check on them," she said quickly, voice unsteady. And just like that, the space between them widened again, leaving Alexander standing in the glow of the lamp, wondering if he had just ruined everything or if something had just begun. The next morning, Isabella was quieter than usual. She made breakfast, packed the twins' lunches, and moved through the apartment with her usual grace, but there was distance in her eyes, as though the storm from last night still lingered between them. Alexander hated it. For years, his life had been a series of controlled moves, meetings, mergers, deadlines. He was good at strategy, but nothing in his world had prepared him for the way Isabella Hartley made him feel like he was losing the one thing he couldn't buy back if it slipped away. That evening, he found her in the playroom reading to the twins. When the story ended, and the children were tucked into bed, Isabella started gathering toys, but Alexander stopped her with a quiet, "We need to talk." She hesitated, then nodded. They ended up in the living room, the city glittering outside the windows. "About last night," he began carefully. Isabella folded her arms. "There's nothing to talk about. It was a moment, that's all." "No," he said firmly. "It wasn't just a moment. Not for me." She looked at him then, eyes shining but guarded. "Alexander, I can't be the woman people whisper about behind your back." "The nanny who stopped," he interrupted, his voice sharp enough to make her blink. He softened. "Do you really think I care what anyone says? You've given my children laughter again. You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever." Her voice trembled. "And what's that?" "Home," he said simply. Silence stretched between them, filled only by the hum of the city below. Isabella turned toward the window, arms wrapped around herself. "I wasn't looking for this," she whispered. "Neither was I," he admitted, stepping closer. "But here it is, and I don't want to lose it because I was too afraid to say what I feel." Finally, she looked at him for the first time. She didn't hide what was in her eyes. The next weeks were different. Slowly, carefully, they began to shift from employer and nanny to something more. It was in the small things at first, a touch lingering too long when she handed him a cup of coffee, a smile that carried more than politeness that the twins noticed before anyone else. "Why does Daddy smile more now?" Emma asked one night, head tilted in curiosity. Isabella only blushed, tucking the blanket around her. "Maybe because he's learning what matters." Months later, the penthouse didn't feel so cold anymore. There were Saturday mornings with pancakes and laughter, Sunday afternoons at the park, evenings with music and bedtime stories read by both of them, side by side while the twins curled against their shoulders. And one spring night, after the children were asleep, Alexander finally kissed Isabella in the living room where it had all begun, the storm outside replaced by a warm breeze drifting through open windows. It wasn't perfect. There were still whispers in the papers, judgment from the world outside. But inside the apartment overlooking Manhattan, there was laughter, music, and the steady heartbeat of a family healing itself. Because in the end, the billionaire and the nanny hadn't just fallen in love. They had built something stronger than ambition, louder than the city, brighter than the walls he had once built around his life. They had built home. If you loved Alexander and Isabella's journey, rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for more incredible tales of love against all odds. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the greatest wealth isn't money, but the people who make your world feel alive again.